This week on The Necessary Entrepreneur, we welcome Josh Quinn, co-founder of Boone County Distilling Company. Josh has a background in law enforcement, including a role as an investigator for the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Josh and his best friend and business partner, Jack Wells, founded Boone County Distilling Company in 2012, which is located approximately 15 miles south of Cincinnati, Ohio, and is a member of the Kentucky Craft Bourbon Trail. During the conversation, Josh and I talked about the origins of the company, building trust over time, human connectivity, cultivating relationships, being underrated, which I love, and that past performance is the best indicator of the future. We also discussed their involvement with sponsoring the Cincinnati Reds and the Cincinnati Bengals, as well as partnering with NBA All-Star Stephen Curry to launch his signature Gentleman's Cut bourbon. Hey, thanks for tuning into The Necessary Entrepreneur. Be sure to like, share, comment, and slam that subscribe button. And I hope you love and find this one as fascinating as I did. Thanks again. Josh Quinn, thanks for coming on today. The significance for the podcast today for talking about business is you are partners in the Boone County Bourbon Distillery Company.
Right.
You probably have an official name.
Josh Quinn.
There you go.
That's the official name.
Wasn't there a Quinn lady on TV, Medicine Woman?
There was Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
So
that's
what are
exactly
you?
Right.
So what are you?
You know, I'm the Mighty Quinn. There's a song, The Mighty Quinn. Maybe that's what I'll take it as.
All right. So give us the story about your Jewish heritage or what you were getting ready to share with us.
Yeah. So I was just having a conversation earlier this morning about it, and it's something that's not too well known. You know, Northern Kentucky is not exactly a place where you find any synagogues. I was born in a Jewish hospital. I'm 51 years old. My mother's Jewish. So in Jewish law, if you're born to a Jewish mother, you're always Jewish, right? On my gravestone, my Hebrew name will go on that one day. However, I grew up until I was about 13 years old. I went to synagogue, Sunday school, went to all the Jewish high holidays. Now, my biological father, who it's a whole different story with that piece of it, but he wasn't an influence in my religious life. But I had to make a choice at some stage, and he was Protestant, so I had to make a choice. And at 13 years old, when you go through the bar mitzvah process, and you start getting that teenager mind, and you have to start making some choices and figuring out where you fit in the world. You know, I just decided that, being Jewish is always going to be part of who I am. But I also struggled with the part of having a parent that was a Christian with a Catholic background and the Quinn name. So I just chose to respect both of them. And now fast forward a little bit, as I went through life, I ended up marrying a Catholic. So I had to convert to Catholicism so my wife, Kim, could receive the sacrament of marriage. And I've practiced that for a long time. But even still today, I still claim Jewish heritage. Most people know that. Some people don't that know me. They're a little surprised. You know, they hear the last name of Quinn, and then they take a look at me. Yeah, and not that I'm a big guy. I'm 5'6", 180 pounds, but blonde-haired, or maybe a little salt and pepper now, but blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and they just don't think of that.
I love something you said about you respected both religions or heritages.
Yes.
That is something, we'll dig into the business and entrepreneurship. Go over, that is something we're missing in society these days.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you form that distinction? Is it just because it's so close to you because it's family?
Yeah. Because
we can learn something from this in society.
Well, so there's my favorite poem. There's a poem by the Indian chief Tecumseh, and it starts off with living your life. And if you've got someone working on the internet, you can find that poem. But it's a poem by Tecumseh, and you would have found it in the movie maybe 2006 or 7. There was a movie called Act of Valor, which is where I first saw it. And at the end of it, it's such a great poem about respecting others. And it goes on to say, "Trouble no person about their religion. Respect others' views and demand that they respect yours." And then it kind of goes on. So I think that probably describes the essence of me. And then in my law enforcement background, I would tell you that as a young person, being Jewish, I was kicked off of a school bus for being Jewish. I had at Colerain High School. Sorry, Colerain. I was required to sit the bench on a Friday night football game because I missed a Thursday walkthrough practice for 2 Jewish high holidays. And I remember asking the coach why I was benched, and I played defense. And the coach said, "Well, you missed practice on Thursday." And I I said, well, it's a Jewish high holiday. It was actually, then it was like the Super Bowl of Jewish holidays. It was Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah fell in the same time period. And he said, well, what are those? And I said, well, it's like Easter and Christmas all rolled into one. And he said, well, unfortunately, it ain't Easter and it ain't Christmas, and you're on the bench. Now, my parents wanted to get involved, and I begged and pleaded with them not to do that because it would just cause me more grief than anything, so they didn't. So I kind of grew up with those things. And then, of course, as you grow up, this is the darker side of it. You hear jokes. It doesn't matter what race, religion, ethnicity you are. Nobody likes any kind of a joke at your expense for,
a slight
in any way. So I would hear those things, but it's because the way I look. Nobody would ever guess my background. And you just internalize those. But that translates into a drive. So law enforcement was good for me. And then wind the clock forward to when I got into the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force locally. One of the great cases that I had to work was James Alex Fields Jr., who was a graduate of Cooper High School in Boone County. He was the person in August 12th, if I'm not mistaken, of 2017, took his Dodge Charger in Charlottesville, Virginia, and drove it down, I believe it was Water Street, and killed Heather Heyer. But he was a Nazi. He hated everybody, including Jews. So it translates into this drive and passion of respecting everybody. And I would do that for anybody. It doesn't matter what your race, religion, ethnicity is. I respect everybody.
How, so that's, you said Tecumseh. And you said that explains you as a person.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That goes in line with just respecting other humans. It kind of goes in line with an attitude from law enforcement on the good way to do it and stuff, right? It's because when you come into contact with people who aren't respecting others, a lot of times they have problems.
100%. When I was in high school, from grade school, you could probably go back and interview folks that I went to elementary school, junior high, and high school. And if there was somebody getting bullied, that for some kind of a whatever their issue was. Doesn't matter what it was, but if there was something, even if I couldn't do anything about it, I tried. I hated bullies. And I would always stand up for the little guy, 100%.
Is it a chicken or egg thing? Is it because you got bullied? Do you think that's where it came from, or did you naturally feel that before that happened?
I can't answer that. I think, when God built me, there was something injected to my DNA, and it's that of a protector. At the end of the day, it's always going to be part of me. If I see something happening that I don't like, when a person is getting attacked for whatever that it is, and it's a personal thing, that's when I become your greatest friend. And conversely, I become the person doing the attacking. I become their worst enemy,
regardless of what it is.
Regardless.
Yeah. Why do you think? What's the fundamental reason that we should respect other humans? Like, why is that important?
Well, we'll go back to the law enforcement piece. It's like your fingerprint, right? We've all watched crime shows, and if we can solve any crime with a fingerprint, right? Because they're all unique. Everybody has a different fingerprint. Just like our DNA is different from our fingerprints. We're all different and unique, and we all have a life story to tell. Whatever that story is, we all come from different places. Now, I'll give you a quick example. I have a friend, and I have these discussions with this friend. And I'll keep the names, to myself at the moment, but you'll get the idea. And this person was put in a position of leadership in the greater Cincinnati area, high leadership. And we had a discussion about some of the troubles they were having. And they were from some other place, not Northern Kentucky or greater Cincinnati. And I said, do you know what your problem is? It's where you're from. And I asked the person, do you know where you're from? And they said whatever they said. And I said, no. It's because you're from someplace else. That's sometimes the problem. Even if you just come from a different place and we all look alike, you still run into problems. Now, imagine coming from someplace else when you don't look like everybody else. It causes you more problems. So, I try to respect everybody in that realm. And, I spent 27 years doing that. That's just a part of my DNA.
It's just built in.
Built in, man.
So was it natural? We'll tell the story of, I'm so interested in, so I'm from Boone County, Kentucky. And so it just happens that Boone County Distillery, right? But there's a big story behind this brand, right? About all the way back in the 1800s. You're going to know all the history, but they could go to your website, right? And is it BooneCountyDistillery.com?
BooneDistilling.com.
Okay. And so they could look at the story, but it's awesome because all the way back in the 1800s and then goes through Prohibition, there was a time in Petersburg, Kentucky, where this distillery was putting out 4 million gallons of bourbon a year. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And then the boats stopped coming down the river, and then things changed.
Yeah.
And Prohibition was a challenge. So there's a lot of stories here, but go to 2015. I'm sure you're retiring from law enforcement somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Right? And you're sitting down with a friend, one of these crazy entrepreneurs that I share a little bit of bloodline with those types of people. Like you said earlier, it's like learning to fly a plane, I guess, without being a pilot or something.
Building a plane as you're flying it.
Wow. So talk about the story and the history over the past 9 years with you guys and the story of this brand and why it's special to you and a part of this mission and idea and purpose.
Yeah, so we'll go to the very beginning of the story. So my best friend and my business partner, I've got to give him a shout out because he deserves all the credit for getting us to where we are today. It's Jack Wells. Jack is in the coal business. He owns a company called Emerald International in Florence, Kentucky. That's been the economic driver for his life, but he's an entrepreneur. He's been in lots of things. So in 2012, somewhere around there, he was going through a divorce, which was terrible. And I was hanging out with him on a cold winter night. It might have been February or something, who knows. But we're in his basement, and Jack was a Canadian whiskey drinker, and he loves his high-end stuff, right? So he's got like this crazy bottle of, Crown Royal, whatever it was, and he's just telling me how much he loves it. And then there's Josh, who grew up on Scotch whiskey and switched over to bourbon whiskey maybe 20, 25 years ago. And we're just discussing the nuances of whiskey and life. Whiskey is the oil of conversation, as we know, and it just kind of gets things going. So as we're talking, bourbon was on the upswing. I think bourbon started its upswing maybe 2009, right around there. So this is 3 years after that happened. So we're in the basement, and Jack says, let's build a distillery. How hard can it be? Now, I've got to get this across to your viewers exactly how this happened. And I don't have any pots or pans or to dangle or clank around. I don't have any bombs or...
We've got bottles of bourbon. We won't bring those in.
Yeah, we can...
Boone County.
So, okay, bottles of bourbon. So here, maybe this is a good visual. So for Jack, there was a commercial for moonshiners that comes on his television. And it's got Tim and Tickle in there, and he's got his overalls on with no shirt on underneath and a straw cowboy hat, which is fun. But Jack looks up and he says, if these guys can do it, we can do it. How hard can it be? Now, add in a bunch of bourbon bottles crashing against the walls, breaking, bombs going off, any pots and pans clanking around. That was Jack's personality. I just can't get the emotion and passion across enough. That was the entrepreneurial explosion that came through. And then he says, how hard can it be, which is the famous line. And then here we are so many years later, and, me being the consummate, I'm an investigator. That was my background. And I'm pretty calm. And I said, we'll figure it out. So he calls me 2 days later. And I picked the phone up, and he says, how are we doing on the distillery? And I looked at the phone, and I thought, man, he's still drunk. And I just shrugged my shoulders and laughed and said, I'm working on it. And I basically blew him off, and I hung the phone up. So another week or two goes by, and he calls me again, and he says, where are we at on the distillery? And then I said, time out. Are we serious or not? And he laughed, and he said, hey, it doesn't cost anything to ask questions. And that's where it began.
How long from that idea? I was just talking to someone yesterday, a couple ladies from Vermont who have a growing business. And most people in my world come to me with ideas. And normally they end there. And so I think that's what this entrepreneurial spirit is. It's these ideas, and it's people that just want to take action and they want to create something with them. So what took this thing from an idea from you guys to then him picking up the phone multiple times and pushing you? What then was the catalyst to turn it into action?
Easy. Friendship, trust, belief. Those are the foundations. And I've said this a couple times in my life. I've said this, and it's resonating more recently. If you don't have a proper foundation for any of your relationships, and then you start trying to build something on a flimsy foundation, nothing will stand the test of time, right?
Yeah. So we're talking about trust. How does can you form that? Can you build it? Does it have to organically be there, and then you decide to go into business?
Trust. Trust comes in a lot of forms, and it comes over time. It comes with one little thing after another. So it doesn't have to be a bunch of big things. And like some people will, the bases are loaded, and you get to the plate, and you want to hit a grand slam. Hey, just take a walk. It doesn't matter as long as you get the guy on third base to home plate and you get a run.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you get that person to get that run. You need to get them across the plate.
Is the trust just having faith that, hey, this person I'm going into business with, they're just going to try to do the right things? Because it's not all going to work out the plan, but is that the trust piece? Like, I'm in this with the right good person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have this saying that past performance is the best predictor of future behavior. So if you've seen someone operate in the past and they've given you no reason to distrust them, and if you've seen good things in the past, it should stand the reason that in the future they're going to continue to act the same.
Same thing applies to a criminal mindset.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Yeah. It's like, could you change? Yeah, but not many people do.
Yeah, a zebra, does it ever lose its stripes? No.
I'm sure we could paint some on, but it'd wash off at some point, right?
Of course.
So how long did it take from those conversations over those 2 or 3 weeks for you guys to say, okay, we're filing the LLC, here's the plan, we're investigating, figuring out this Boone? How long did that take until it really started to turn to something?
The LLC, I don't remember, maybe a couple weeks, couple months, I don't know. It didn't get real till the first check came. So so when the money starts flying over the fence back and forth, then stuff gets pretty real. So here's where that happened. So my first visit is we have chatted to be an entrepreneur and to be a successful business person, and I'll ask you the question: how many hours a week do you have to work to get there?
If I try to, it's different every week, and I'm going to hand this back to you by hopefully saying this. I have to be committed to work whatever the number is at different times, all the way up to 24-hour hours in a row for an undetermined amount of days if I'm committed to making it work. The commitment has to be so strong, it can't be distilled down to a 9 to 5, man. That's what I've found.
Amen.
And sometimes it sucks.
Amen. You got it. So the word that I just took away from that was the word commitment.
Absolutely.
You have to be committed. Okay, so the commitment piece of it, I was still in law enforcement. I actually didn't retire until 2021, so I spent like the better part of 8 or 9 years working full-time while still doing this. So my first visit was to Vendome Brass and Copper Works. And if Sheriff Mike Helmig is listening, I'm sorry, Mike, but here's kind of what I did. So he would send me down to a conference in Louisville that would start at whatever time it was, let's say 8 a.m.
At the Brown or wherever it is you're staying. Yeah,
who knows. But I would set up appointments before work, during lunch, and after work, any time that I wasn't on the clock, so to speak. So 6 a.m., I was supposed to be in Louisville for an 8 a.m. conference. I arrive at Vendome at 6 a.m. I meet with Rob Sherman, the CEO and president of Vendome Brass and Copper Works. He doesn't know who I am, which is a great benefit. So he takes me on this great, wonderful first-class tour of Vendome. And if you've never seen pot stills being built, it North America's premier still maker, and I've got to say that again, Vendome Brass and Copper Works, man, if you ain't using a Vendome, you're using turkey bacon, and it's not the real thing. Sorry for the other folks out there, but that's the truth. So Rob Sherman took me on this tour for 2 hours, and when you see a still that's built, I've never been to the Ferrari factory, but they're beautiful. They're works of art. When you see these stills, you see the copper, the sheets of copper, and then they get hammered out. And then when the still's built, they're just this beautiful, shiny, like a brand new penny, beautiful, shiny copper work of art. Now, after time, they patina and they just
a little green and
they just patina out. But he took me through, and I was so caught, I felt like I was in the Ferrari factory for whiskey, basically. So at the end of it, this is the funny part. He says, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "I'm a cop." And he's like, "Oh, shit. No money." That's what he thought. No money. So he hands me off to, I don't even think it was a salesperson. I think he handed me off to some graphic designer or something at a cubicle. And they showed me some pictures and then handed me a list of consultants, which was the win. So that list of consultants, I think there were 8 names on there. And one of them had a 513 area code, which is in the area, in greater Cincinnati that we're in. So I started with that. And that was Larry Ebersold. Larry Ebersold has worked for Seagram's for 38 years. ran the plant in Lawrenceburg for 20, and he lives in Hebron in Thornwild subdivision. And Larry, he's not a master distiller because that's a salesman's term. He's a chemical engineer, and Larry knows how to make whiskey and some of the best of it. So it started there, the commitment. You just work whenever you can. I squeezed it in every facet of my life, but the question was, when did it get real? The first consulting invoice was sent to my house, and I opened it up, and it was like $2,000. And I'm a cop. Come on, we got a public servant salary. I don't make that much. Didn't make that much money. And I open it up, and I see $2,000. I called Jack, my business partner, and said, it's $2,000. And he said, well, are you going to pay it? And I said, well, I can cover it this month, but I can't continue this trajectory. That's not going to work. I got 3 kids in Catholic school. I got all this, that, and the other. I can't do that. And he just laughed. He said, you haven't seen anything yet.
And so when was that? 2000
The meeting with Larry, so let me back into that, probably 2013.
Okay. So from 2013 till now.
Yeah.
How much has been invested?
Oh, wow.
Not taking out any profits or money back. How many millions?
Let me think about that. I'm chewing through that in my head at the moment. I would probably tell you about $8 million, maybe, somewhere in that vicinity.
Did you think that in the beginning?
Are you kidding me, man? We got the cost back. Bill Tobin, Tobin Group built our facility. We bought the land from them, and then they built it. And when the initial plans came back and the construction schedule, and then the estimate, I mean, it was like $2.1 million just to build that. And then we had to buy 500 barrels of whiskey from Indiana, which back then it was really cheap. We bought 500 barrels. We could have bought 1,000. We really regret not buying all 1,000. However, that was a $700,000 wire transfer based on 2 ounces of whiskey. So, right there, you're about, whatever it was, $3 million. And then over time, we've bought more whiskey. We've added on to the facility. We've added an event center. We had to add on to the Rick House and so on. And then sponsorships. We've got the Reds and the Bengals.
How do you feel now looking back? You share the story a lot, but 2013 to a $2,000 bill coming in to now $8 million plus or minus a couple bucks, right? How do you feel now about the journey?
I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I'm very fortunate. I've got such a unique story to tell between local law enforcement. Well, first of all, let me go back. Working for the greatest sheriff that this region has ever seen, Sheriff Simon L. Lease Jr. There'll never be another one like him. Moving on to the Boone County Sheriff's Office with Mike Helmig, the FBI, bourbon. I've had a very blessed life, having grown up with a couple different religions in my life, and then, I've got a rule. Good people always find other good people. I have been so blessed, but the journey, just very thankful. It's put me in positions I never thought I would be in, but I never, ever forget who I am. I've never forgotten that. I'm very grateful. So how do I feel? Thankful, grateful, all those things.
What made Simon Lease, can I use great? What made him great?
He was the best. Simon, this region we'll never see another one like him. He was the great 3-in-1 of law enforcement. So Sheriff Lease was a prosecutor, a judge, and a sheriff. He had done all of the law enforcement jobs that a person could do in that industry. He was also a first lieutenant in the Marine Corps, in the JAG Corps, so he was a lawyer. He's a guy who instilled everything, all the good stuff from day one when I walked into his police academy. A friend of mine had gotten me into the mix there, but a friend of mine pulled a string, got me hired, which is a whole nother story. But I get in there, and my friend says, don't disappoint me. So Sheriff Lease had some high standards. And when I went in, I won every award there was because I just didn't want to disappoint my friend. Now, Sheriff Lease demanded that you keep your hair short, which, that's I don't know how to do anything else other than my current haircut. Staying in shape. I'm 51 years old, and I would challenge any of your listeners. You can come to CrossFit with me at 6 a.m.
Which one?
Triple Crown CrossFit. I'll put a shout out to Triple Crown CrossFit in Richwood, Walton, Kentucky. Okay. I go 6 a.m. every day with a small group of people, and then I do jiu-jitsu at least once or twice a week. I'm the oldest guy in the gym, and I get destroyed every single time I go, but it's part of the journey, and they're all great guys and gals. But Sheriff Lease instilled all that in me. That's why I keep up all those standards. And in fact, for my dress, he would probably frown at the way I'm dressed today, but it's only because I'm not wearing shirt stays to pull my shirt down so it's nice and taut all the time.
Wow.
I quit that a couple years ago.
You'd have something to say about mine for sure then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right, all of us. Yeah. He'd find something with all of us.
So is it he took everything real serious?
Absolutely. Yeah. Sheriff Lease was a guy that if your wife was delivering a child and you had to miss work for the birth of your child, and you called in sick, Sheriff Lease might say, "Well, don't you have in-laws or family that can handle that? I need you at work."
Yeah. I also agree with you. You experienced it, but I would like some of the traits and the things that he taught. I don't know if generations now like that rigidity and that approach.
Yeah.
It's kind of different times we're in. We could go down a whole podcast on that, right? I saw it. I saw the mood just changing. You're like, yeah, you just brought something out in me here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about that without it being negative and just about that, about the change in society and how you really accepted that, and maybe that rigidity was accepted more 30 years ago, and it just doesn't seem. You got to be a little more kind now. We have to be a little bit more nice. It's more about making people feel good.
Well, in the law enforcement realm, we'll stick down that path. It's come really down to in my time. So you have to remember, I worked in a time when there were no cameras, except for that big thing that you'd put on your shoulder, and everybody knew you
knew it was there.
You knew it was there.
Yeah.
And then you go into the in-car cameras, and then you go to the body cameras, and then now you have pinhole cameras that nobody can see any place. So what has changed? I was just having this discussion the other day with someone who was not from the law enforcement industry, and I hope I change their mind about how they feel about us as public safety people. It doesn't matter whether you're police, fire, a dispatcher, whatever that it is. 99 point. We've got a better rate of not doing wrong than clergymen. Think about that. We're pretty good people. End of the day, we've got a better record than the clergy. And I hate to say that, but if you're religious and you put me up against some of these terrible things that have happened, we've got better records than clergy. So it takes one bad apple, though. It takes one video. It's really not even the verbal stuff anymore. It's a video, and a video can say 1,000 things. Now, in law enforcement, unfortunately, it's the only profession in America where you're authorized to use force. It's legal. Now, that only accounts for maybe 1 out of every 1,000 encounters you have. Not even that. It's very rare, but it always gets captured. So I get asked this sometimes by folks when they're trying to get in that line of work. They say, "Josh, what classes should I take in college for law enforcement?" Now, if I were to ask you this, what class would you think you should take?
I'm going to be honest and real, man. I don't think there are any.
There's one.
Okay.
There's one.
Psychology.
An acting class.
There you go.
Yeah. Go take an acting class because you're always going to be on camera. Always. That's the most important class you take. You recognize that you're speaking to a future audience, always, and you're being filmed. So it does keep you on your toes. But what has changed? I think if law enforcement folks just stay down the path of, the basics, it's not hard. It's like in my playbook, I have one play. I run the ball up the middle. That's it. It's coming every single time, and you just have to defend it and stop it. Stay physically fit, look the part, have that command presence as it is, which is basically looking like you're confident. Make sure your uniform looks nice. Make sure you treat people with respect. Make sure that you do what you say you're going to do. Answer your phone. Return messages. Return messages within a couple hours, not a week later. So basic customer service skills, basic treating people how you would like to be treated. And unfortunately, society, this thing called social media, man, things go, there's no rhyme or reason why things go viral. It just happens. And, when you're in law enforcement, sometimes you just become an unfortunate target. And for those people, some of them, maybe they righteously deserve that. Others, you shake your head and you think, man, what has happened here?
Yeah. I know that I say this often, that I think that so I'm 44, born in 79, graduated high school in 97. I feel like I'm the last, not the last generation. I feel like I was the last decade of people that still got to act like a normal kid and not get in trouble for everything. Because if you would have documented everything that we did, and I hung out with good people. I wasn't out here doing bad things all the time. But when you're growing up as kids, you're learning how to be an adult and do life better. And if we would have documented and videotaped and put all the things on social media that we did that we could have gotten in trouble for, that would have been even blown way out of proportion, I might not be the same person today.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate what – I'm sure there's some benefits to it for kids, but I'm glad that I didn't have to go through that.
It's crazy, in being a kid today. So think about rumors when you were in, let's just call it grade school, high school, whatever, rumors. If a rumor started on a Friday – back before we had phones and social media and we had to use, or mobile phones even for that fact, a rumor would be dead by Monday morning. It was gone. It was over with. But now that we have, the reality is we've got mobile devices, we have social media, text messaging, whatever, the rumor's perpetuated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it never stops. And in fact, it sometimes it just gets worse by the time Monday gets there and does not die. That's the unfortunate part.
So the funny thing is, the other side of it is it really benefits us in business now. You're right. You guys can you can revive a distillery. I could start a real estate company and go into an environment of saturated markets, because I would make an argument that the bourbon business was already saturated, and you're in the backyard of it. Yeah. You're in Kentucky. You're an hour away from where this stuff really happened in the past, and you can come into the business and within 9 years you can start to have relevancy. Same thing for me. I could start a real estate company licensed 19 years ago, but the real estate company 16 years ago, and now we're playing with who were the big boys then. And my attitude is not just playing, we're starting to dominate, and that exposure, a lot of it has come through marketing and social media.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's awesome if you do it the right way and through exposure, but then it can also hurt. What made you guys think that you could come into the backyard of bourbon and make an investment and it be profitable, that you can make this work, that you could actually build something successful? What made you think that you could do that?
2 words: Jack Wells. That's it. My business partner is there is not much that intimidates him or gets him to back down. That's just his DNA, and probably without his energy and belief, a guy like me could never have gotten involved in it because I didn't have the money. Jack Wells, that's it. That's what I would tell you.
If you had to go, let's say you guys get a huge windfall and you sell this business. I'm sure that they should have bought you in the beginning when maybe you would have settled for a lot less than you'd settle for now.
Right.
They should have. But you're going to get offers. You probably get offers. There's conversations. At some point, if you have a huge windfall and you sell the business for hundreds of millions of dollars, what have you learned through this process that you could then take on to any other entrepreneurial ventures and endeavors?
Never lose touch with who you are as a person. So I have a friend from 8th grade, and he's a president of a trucking company up in Michigan now in Grand Rapids. When I see that guy every year at Keeneland, both of our kids, we have kids who go to UK. When I see him, it's all the things we've been through in life. It's like that guy has never changed. We've always been those 8th grade guys. We're adults now, but I never forgot who I was, and he hasn't forgotten who he is. Now, we have all these business things that are happening, but my fundamental DNA has never really changed that much. So that's what I would take away from it. If there's a huge windfall of money, will I upgrade my car? Probably. I drive a Toyota Highlander now, which is a great vehicle, but I'm not a sports car guy. I would probably just buy a nice pickup truck. Really nice one.
Yeah.
And then it's funny you mentioned the windfall. So think of this. So let me pivot to this part of the business. Did you ever think that a guy like me would be producing bourbon for 4-time NBA champion, 2-time MVP Steph Curry?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even like basketball, man.
So let me answer that real quick. I've learned that the answer to that is yes, because I think almost anyone is capable of almost anything.
Yeah,
I do. And so when I was growing up, the way I was raised, I wouldn't have been able to answer it that way. But I'm not surprised. Meeting you, the confidence, the control that you have, the attitude, the perspective, the fundamental principles and values. Yeah, as long as you learn the right tactics, and it's probably Jack Wells, it's been awesome being around him. Mm-hmm. There's some business and entrepreneurial stuff that you have probably adopted and injected to your DNA.
Absolutely.
right? That you could now carry that on and create another business.
Yeah, and truthfully, if this sells one day, which of course, when you build these things, Jack and I haven't paid anything in 10 years. It all goes back into the business. But you're building value in something that it becomes turnkey, which on the back end of it, it is a completely turnkey operation now. In fact, what the Steph Curry deal provided us was the ability to buy a $300,000 automatic bottling machine. And it's turnkey now. We used to do all that stuff by hand. A year ago, we were doing that by hand. It would take us a week to get, a certain amount of product done. Now that same amount of product takes us 45 minutes.
How did the Steph Curry thing happen?
Yeah, so there's a guy that owns a winery in Napa Valley named John Schwartz, and the name of the winery is Amuse-Bouche. So John Schwartz, years ago, there were three, in the Boone County Distilling universe, there were three original partners. It was Gene Taft out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who was friends with Jack in the coal business. They were partners in some ventures, and then me and Jack. So Gene Taft, he travels a lot for his work, and he ended up, and he likes art, by the way, likes fine art. So he was out in Napa Valley, and he went to Amuse-Bouche, which is a high-end winery. I think the bottles out there go from, I think the cheapest bottle I've ever seen is $100, and then they go up from there, $800 or something. Not cheap. So Gene was out there, and they were discussing some piece of artwork that was on the label of a wine bottle. Because we know wine bottles, the labels change all the time, and it's really about the cool name or the cool label, maybe not always about what the liquid in the bottle. So it was a piece of artwork that was on a bottle, and he was discussing at the winery with somebody about the artwork, and then they both said they own that piece of artwork personally in their residences. And then they found out that they both owned, one owned a distillery, one owned a winery, and then they argued about who had the lower number on the artwork and all that, nonsense. Mm-hmm. And then John Schwartz, being the consummate marketing guy that he is, and he's been in the spirits business for a really long time. He's really good at it. And he said, I want to create a brand, and it's called Lone Whisker. I want to create a brand called Lone Whisker, but I want to put 12-year-old whiskey in it. So we cut a deal with him, and we produced for him, it's called Bottling on Account, Lone Whisker. And then there's another product called the Dogfather. So as time goes on, John, being a California guy that he is, he's got an affinity for basketball. He did a nice bottle for Kobe Bryant when back in the day, I think maybe when he was on some kind of a nice bottle for him. He had some kind of an affinity with the Golden State Warriors. He got involved with Steph Curry, and I believe Steph's wife's name is Aisha. Mm-hmm. He got involved with her, and he produced a wine called Domaine Curry. Now, Domaine Curry sold back in May for an undisclosed amount. We don't know. And at that point, I think he pitched Steph on a bourbon idea. And from the Curry universe, those guys get pitched with stuff. Think about how many business deals a week. Like you said earlier, they're just tons and tons of ideas, and it's probably like a black hole for money. Mm-hmm. But he believes in John. It goes back to trust, right? In relationships, it goes back to commitment. They know they trust each other. They know they're committed, and they're all there to do the right thing to create a brand. And plus, Steph loves bourbon, and that's the lane he wanted to operate in.
And then, so this goes deep into just relationships.
Yeah.
Right? So the relationship that the two guys sit down and develop over something that they have in common, right? These spirits, wine, right? And they have a conversation and start hamming it up over fine art. And then the guy that has he probably was went deep with the Golden State Warriors because it's in the back. It's Golden State Warriors. It's San Jose. It's that whole area of California.
Right.
But the relationship that he created with Steph's wife, that went well. He built trust there, as you talked about. And then you just get to carry that reputation on to anything else. And then that relationship expands. All this business stuff we talk about, it could be real estate, it could be bourbon, it could be whatever it is. It could be a law practice. If you build great relationships with people, those tentacles spread far and wide.
100%.
Right? And so what does the average person starting a business, what do we take from that? Like if they're listening and they're like, I need to go create relationships. These organically happen, though.
Yeah.
Right? Can you intentionally create these, or is it who you are as a human? You're putting that out into the world, and if it's good enough, you'll create them?
Yeah. So there's two words I like to use a lot. At least in my world, I do things very intentionally and very deliberately. Like most things that I do generally speaking, have a purpose. So let's go back to my earliest memory with my business partner, Jack Wells. I just took the basic building blocks of what my mom and dad taught me to do, which was say thank you to people. So when my mom would take me shopping, she just always wanted me to give her a hug and a kiss and say thank you. That's all she really ever wanted. So as I've gone forward in my life, when I met Jack, you know, they were taking care of us at the opening night for a pub that he had opened. Anyway, I went up to him to say thank you. I thought he was the manager of the place. But it was taking that initial step to go up to another human being that you don't know. You don't know their position. You have no clue what they do for a living. It goes back to that respect for everybody on how we should treat others. I just went up to say thank you. That was it. I thought he was the manager. I had no clue he was the owner of the place. I had no clue that 30 years later that he would go on to become who he is, and me going on my journey. And I had no clue he'd be my future best friend. I had no clue. But I just took that initial step to explore the relationship. So you have to start there. Somebody, you know, it's like the showdown at the OK Corral. I mean, somebody's got to go first. And you have to take that step to go shake somebody's hand. You know, if you're an introvert, you don't talk to anybody, it's not going to work out. And you can't chase people because they have deep pockets. You know, people see right through that. You can't chase them because, you know, they're the CEO of some company. You can't chase them for that. It's always better to meet somebody in a random spot when they don't know who you are. And I want to give you a great example of that. So let me share a great story. So I was asked to speak at a local bourbon club, 6 months ago. And at the Boone County Distilling Company, we have a bourbon that we just released that's an Amburana cask finish. Now, when I said that out loud to the crowd of maybe 150 people, somebody raised their hand and asked me the question, what's Amburana? Well, dummy me, I didn't even know what it was. And I didn't have time to pull my phone out and Google it. So I polled the audience because I'm just me. And I said, who here knows what Amburana is? I should know what it is, but I don't, and therefore I probably shouldn't have brought it up. So who knows what it is? And there was a lady who raised her hand, and I walked over to her, and I asked her to tell the crowd her name, and she said her name was Amy. And I said, great, Amy, here's the microphone. Would you mind telling folks what it is? And she rattles off what Amburana is, gave a very detailed professional explanation. So after the presentation, we sit down and we talk for a little bit, and we chit-chat, and she tells me she works for General Electric. Now, I don't know what she does for General Electric. I have no clue. And at the end of the conversation, at 20 or 30 minutes, she slides me a business card and says, call me sometime. You know, we can talk bourbon. The president and CEO of Military Systems, an MIT graduate. She worked for Boeing. She's at GE now. Think about that. The president of General Electric, Military Systems, Aerospace Defense. And I thought, that's all from just being nice and having a conversation and recognizing when you don't know the answer to something, it's okay to say, I don't know, and allow other people to share their knowledge. So, man, you just got to be outgoing and be willing to go take. And I didn't go to her because she was the CEO of anything. I didn't have a clue. I just knew she thought she knew what Amburana was, and she was right.
Maybe you need to teach a class at Northern or something about these skills.
Oh, yeah, I could do that.
Because the new generation coming out, as I'm seeing them, my real estate company, we're hiring people in their 20s. And they're the same good quality human beings. There's so many folks, though, that are missing this skill now that you're talking about. I know it is rare. We'd have that conversation, but it's becoming more rare all the time. And I don't know if it's because of technology and we're not having interpersonal communication. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at them like, what you need to be is a really good salesperson. You need to be intentional, right? You need to be committed in all these things, but you have to be able to interact with another human socially.
Right.
And just find out and unlock these. Because when me and you go to buy something, I'm always that guy. I'm skeptical all the time. I'm like, this person's going to give me a sales pitch. I don't need the BS today. But if somebody's just really honest and human, I'm like, let me have a conversation with you.
Right.
And I end up buying something from them.
Yeah.
And the unlock to a really good real estate salesperson, I'm sure a bourbon salesperson, is just having this human connectivity ability.
Right.
That's all it is. And so, and I think we're getting all these big degrees, spending all this time in traditional education, and they're coming out not with that tool. So I think you could build a class around it. I really do, man.
I appreciate it. When I was another thing, when God built me, it took a while for that to come out, but for the interpersonal communication piece, I went to college for some of that, and then in law enforcement, I've been in the people business a long time. That's what I can tell you. I'm in the people business.
There you go. What? So when everybody now comes up to you and says, "Hey, man, I'm thinking about starting a distillery, man. Like this sounds like an awesome idea. What should I do?
Well, first thing I tell them is, you want to be a millionaire? That's the first question.
Then don't do it.
Well, do you want to be a millionaire? That's the first question. And they say, well, of course I do. And I say, well, you have $1 million in your pocket? That's the best way to be a millionaire. Start with $1 million in your pocket. Or you mentioned NKU. And by the way, I'll take the plug. If you know someone at NKU, reach out to them. Tell them I'll build a class and I'll teach it. I really don't know that many people there. However, I was asked to speak at NKU at the Hale
School of Business.
Yeah, School of Business. It was myself, Ken Lewis, and I don't remember who the third person was, but it was a bourbon panel. And that very question came up. They said, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to somebody that wants to start a bourbon distillery? And I got a great big smile on my face like I have now, and I grabbed the microphone, and I leaned in, and I looked at the crowd. I scanned them all, and I said, get yourself a rich friend because you're going to need it.
Do you think it's possible any other way?
No. Impossible.
And you're not a guy that you don't love that word.
No. Nobody likes impossible. No. It's impossible. No. Because think about it. So when you start a distillery, let's go through the math real quick. $4 million is out the door. $4 million. And that's just to build the facility. I mean, we really haven't talked about branding yet. So that $4 million we talked about earlier, that we just knew we wanted to build a whiskey distillery. We had an identity crisis. We didn't even know what we were going to call ourselves at that stage. And then you got to, I bet we spend $8 on marketing for every dollar of whiskey that we make. So $4 million is out the door. Let me ask you this question. We have white whiskey coming off the still, which I don't know that's going to be any good in 4 years. That's faith. That's what the engineer is telling you. Have you ever, this is the question for you, have you ever gone to a bar and asked a bartender for a moonshine cocktail?
Never.
No, nobody does.
No.
I mean, it's like something you would buy when you go to a local distillery. You buy the new make because you're there and it's $20 and you'll put it on your shelf, but you'll never drink it. You might have some on your tasting or something like that, but that's about as far as it goes. So from a business standpoint, I'm not going to make money by selling, $20 here and there to customers that come through. They want the brown stuff. They want the aged stuff. So then you have to go out and find aged product on the market. And it's got to be the same aged product. You can't have this hodgepodge of different distilleries, ages, and mash bills. So you find that. Because if you don't have that for your cash flow, it's a big, fat goose egg zero. $4 million out the door with zero cash flow coming in. And it costs, back then it was $40,000 a month to operate the business, between employees and making the whiskey, plus the $4 million out the door with no cash flow. Nothing. So you've got to go find that product, and then that product will last you until yours is ready after 4 or 5 years. 6 years after you sign the building contract. It's really 6 years until your product's ready, maybe 7. So the consumer gets used to having a source product like ours was from the old Seagram's facility, or MGP today, and then when our whiskey's released, it tastes a little different. Everybody knows that. And then I'll get on some other nuances with marketing that we've had to switch along the way. But that's sort of a long way around the barn.
So explain how you make how do you make bourbon?
Oh, bourbon's easy. It's not rocket science, truthfully. So bourbon, think of it like we all have kitchens in our homes, so we can all identify with that. We have a kitchen, and if you want to make, let's say, chicken soup, right? You need a pot. So you have to have a stove, and you have to have a pot. You have to have liquid, which is either going to be water with a bouillon cube, or it's going to be chicken broth you bought at the store. And then as you continue on, you're probably going to put things like carrots and onions and celery as your base, and maybe some garlic, and you got to have chicken. And then you got to ask yourself, do you want noodles? Do you want this or that? And then you start building a different recipe, because like your grandma's chicken noodle soup and mine aren't the same.
But it's still chicken noodle soup.
Still chicken noodle soup, though. It's like bourbon. They're all just a little bit different. So how do you make bourbon? Bourbon, at the end of the day, as long as you have your kitchen, which is your distillery, and you have all the right pieces of cooking equipment, your pots and your pans and all that stuff, and your ingredients, what we do, we have corn. We make really 2 kinds of bourbon. We make a 21% rye bourbon and a 21% wheat bourbon. What does that mean? It means that 75% of the recipe is corn, 21% is rye, or wheat, and then the rest is malted barley. So we bring those in as whole grains, so whole kernels of corn, whole kernels of rye and malted barley, and we weigh that out to a certain percentage, and then we send it through a hammer mill, which is basically a device that turns the whole grain into flour. So you take that like Indian corn in the fall, something like that, right? You can't eat it; it'll break your teeth. So or popcorn before you pop it, you can't eat that stuff. But you grind it up and you make a flour out of it. You take that flour and then you cook it, right? So you cook it for a period of time, and you take the starches and convert them to sugars, a lot like if you have a fresh piece of corn on the cob that you just picked off somebody's farm. If you bite into it, it's got that bittery, starchy taste.
Until you cook it.
Yeah, until you cook it. Then it gets sweet. Same thing. So you cook it. Once the grains are cooked and you've converted the starches to sugars, then you put them in a fermentation tank, just another tank. You fill the tank up, you put some yeast in it, you let it go on for 2 or 3 days, and then all of those sugars get eaten by the yeast and they convert into alcohol. And then how do you make the whiskey from there? Then you put it in the still. We have a pot still, and you have to separate the alcohol from everything else. So there's a lot of waste in the whiskey business. So everything I just said, 3/4 of that is waste. It goes in the trash can. And then 25% of it goes, into making whiskey.
And it comes out as a clear liquid, a clear alcohol.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which that's a moonshine.
Yeah.
So if we were back in the woods, I'm sure where some of my heritage came from, right? The stills they make, that's moonshine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so how does it become brown? What do we do to make it brown?
So in the whiskey world, 100% of the color, okay, so follow me, 100% of the color and 70% of the flavor comes from the barrel. It's a charred new American oak barrel. So it comes off the still white. Looks like water. Clear water, a bottle of water. That's what it looks like. When you put it into that barrel, it turns brown like a beautiful, delicious bourbons that you have in the studio here. So 100% of the color comes from the barrel, and then about 70% of the flavor.
And then you don't mess with it. There's not any tinting. There's no dyes that are put in for the most part of it.
Well, when it comes to whiskey, how do I describe this?
See, now we're talking about our Tennessee folks.
Right. So do you mess with it? Well, Mother Nature is a woman you don't mess with. So you take that barrel of whiskey and you stick it away in your warehouse for you're really not going to see it again for another 5 or 6 years. Now, when is it ready? That's a great question. Have you ever been inside? Have you ever been with your significant other and they're getting ready? You're getting ready to go out to dinner, or you have a deadline you have to meet. You're going to a party or an event or something. Have you ever asked your significant other? Have you ever said, "Hurry up"?
I would never do.
Is that a good idea to tell your wife or significant other, "Hurry up"?
You're setting yourself up for a bad night.
You got it, man. Try telling that to Mother Nature, because she's not going to listen either, and she's ready when she's ready.
Yeah. So what about Irish whiskey? I just saw there was an auction where something about one of the most expensive bottles or rare bottles of Irish whiskey just sold for some crazy number. Is that different than whiskey that's made in Tennessee?
Well, whiskey in Tennessee. So whiskey in Tennessee, whiskey in Tennessee, if we're talking about the popular brands, I think we're talking about, it's bourbon. It's the same process. But
why can't they call it bourbon?
They can call it bourbon if they want. There's no law against that. It is legally bourbon. But Tennessee wants to carve out, you have to think, some of these big companies, right? It's big business. So you've got some of these big monster organizations, and they own prominent brands that are Kentucky straight bourbon whiskeys and Tennessee whiskeys, but it's all under the same parent umbrella. So why would you call it a Tennessee bourbon when they already command the Kentucky bourbon market? So you carve out something different to call it Tennessee whiskey, because Tennesseans are proud of their whiskey. Now, it's
just a really similar product.
It's the same product. Yeah.
Same process?
Yeah.
So there's nothing different that you make a bourbon versus one of these Tennessee whiskeys. It's the same process.
Same process. Now, if we had somebody from one of those organizations sitting at the table here with us, then it would ensue this debate and argument. But at its essence, we would ask them, according to Title 27 of the U.S. Code, here are the standards of identity for bourbon. Does yours meet this?
That sounded like some FBI guy telling us about bourbon, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can go that way. I can drill it down, man, where it gets you to a yes or no answer.
But then how long does it sit into a barrel before it's whiskey or bourbon? Like, isn't this a 5-year thing or something?
No, that's a great question. So we're going through a label change right now, and we have a wonderful TTB investigator that works with us. I won't mention her name, but the Tobacco Trade Bureau is basically the governing entity of the spirits industry. It's a lot like the IRS for the rest of us. So the auditor investigator that we have is a truly wonderful person. And we were audited recently, and they always find something. It's nitpicky, and it's like getting the equivalent of getting a jaywalking ticket. It's meaningless.
That's what y'all always find something.
Yeah,
you
man.
pulled me over, and you're going to find something. You're like, man, that back left brake light. No, officer, I'm telling you, it works. No, I know it works. It's just a little dim.
Well, okay, that might have been 22-year-old Josh. Current state Josh would be like,
now you're like, come on, man.
Come on,
the
man.
light's on.
Nobody cares.
All right, so sorry to get you off track.
No, you're good,
Okay.
man. Yeah, the current Josh today is more forgiving. So
she comes in and she's finding something.
Yeah, and she looks at the label. So we have our white whiskey product or moonshine product, whatever you want to call it. The proper name would be whiskey distilled from bourbon mash. Okay, that's really what it is. It's whiskey distilled from a bourbon mash. We call it a whiskey because by the very definition of whiskey, it has to touch wood. Even that white product that you purchase, like ours, Tanner's Curse is what it's called. If you purchase a bottle of Tanner's Curse and if it says the word whiskey on it, it means it has to have touched wood, American oak. It doesn't have to be charred American oak. It just has to be American oak. It doesn't even have to be in a container. It just has to touch oak, like a stave or whatever. So in our case, we were doing that. We had a tank of our white whiskey, and we would put an oak stave in there, and to say it touched wood. Now, it's not very pretty to look at, and we told the investigator we left it in there for 8 minutes, and she said, well, why 8 minutes? It's a random number. And we said, well, because the number 8's built into all of our branding, whether it's the proof of our whiskey or the marketing or whatever. The old Route 8, as we know, in Boone County, it was distillery number 8. 8 appears every place in the branding. So we put 8 on it, 8 minutes. And she said, is it really in there for 8 minutes? We said, well, at least 8 minutes. And she said, why do you really need it then? So we went back and forth with the government about it, and it just turned into a pain. And my business partner and I said, look, let's just get rid of the word whiskey. So what does it need to be called whiskey? It just needs to touch, because not all whiskeys are bourbons. So on the very generic, high-level, 30,000-foot view of whiskey, it just has to touch oak, American oak. That's it. So long way around the barn there.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to get in line, I just talked to you about, we bought a single barrel in the past. This is the new hot thing. You're like, man, come on. Why do we have to talk about this?
Yeah.
Bourbon clubs want to buy them. People, I guess, what makes it cool that it gets to be ours? I bought the barrel, and that's the only one that tastes just like that, and we get to personally brand it with our company. So are you guys doing that type of program now?
Yes, we are. We haven't always done that. We just started doing it again this year. So that's a tough thing. This business, again, like I always go back to the chicken and the egg comment, which one came first. So in this business, we'd like to get all of our base products out to our retailers. However, the retailers don't want to carry your base products. They just want to go to the top of the pyramid for the best that you have, which in most worlds, it's a single barrel. But we don't want to give you something special if you can't even support us on the bottom level. So you've got to kind of find a middle ground there. But we just started that this year. So the business side of it. So if I were to tell you that everything was, sunshine and rainbows, I'd be lying to you. So on the back end of it, the margins for what we make out of the gift shop. All single barrel programs in Kentucky are like this. If you're buying it from the distillery, they're making all the revenue, all the margin. They don't have to share it with the distributor, the retailer, or anybody. So if you come into my shop and you want to buy a single barrel, we'll walk you through a wonderful experience, and we only do 50 of them a year. That's it. We allocate some of those to retailers and then the others to clients, bourbon clubs, businesses, whatever.
We're talking like $6,000 to $8,000.
Probably
Maybe
more like
10.
12.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So out of every barrel, you're probably going to get 200 bottles roughly. I've seen it as low as 120, but probably 200 bottles is what I would budget for. It's $59.99 per bottle, multiplied by 200, so you're in 12,000. Yep. So you come into the distillery, you bring 5 people. That's all that we take for the group. We'll take you out to the warehouse. We pull four barrels. You'll taste it right out of the barrel. You'll have a great time. I'll get you a little inebriated so you're willing to open up your pocketbook some more. That's the genius behind the salesmanship.
Right.
So you're going to have at least 4 cups of whiskey back there, which means you're going to be happy and get talkative. And once you start getting happy and talkative, then we know we're in good shape. And you're always going to, and all the whiskeys are really very consistent, but you're always going to find slight nuances. And everybody magnifies those nuances in conversation because you just can't say they're all great. You got to find one you hate and one you love. It's always like that. And then the other two, or whatever.
What are the things that come out? I remember when we bought our single barrel 2 or 3 years ago. There's things like this one's more spicy and cinnamony, and it's got a raspberry tint, and it's like, what in the world? How do these? And they laid those out, but then we had our own notes. Are those intentional when you go to make it, or does that truly come out of the barrel, or is it in my brain that it tastes like that?
The flavors?
Yeah.
So the flavors, just like I said earlier, we had a discussion about fingerprints and DNA. We're all unique. So throughout your life, you have a series of experiences, whether it's food, and we'll go into the realm of food and drink, or it can be any of the senses. You've experienced something. So if I say the word Amburana, there's nothing in your brain bank that tells you what it tastes or smells like. It's a blank slate. If I say the word cinnamon, we all know what cinnamon is. You got it. If I say the word maple, you think sweet, maple syrup, which is a problem with some things that we do. However, do we put any of those things in there? It's just corn, rye, barley. That's it, in a barrel. It does pull flavors out. Now, for someone like me, I generally speaking write 90% of our tasting notes, and you do have to get creative. But I always go back to the same things. For our base bourbon that we make, it's always the same. Depending on some seasons, I might come up with something fun, which my business partner, when he hears this, he's going to laugh and shake his head. But I do come up with some creative things like sugar cookie. I put in one of them. I'm embarrassed to even say it. I'm sorry. Because we don't put sugar cookies in there. But it was, like October when I was doing the tasting notes, I knew it'd be available.
You're a true marketer.
It was like available around the holidays, and I'm like, it's got notes of honey and caramel and went in sugar cookie.
Yeah.
I came up with almond biscuit once. That was creative. I've probably come up with a bunch of others too. But
so who would you prefer to sell those 50 single barrels to?
Who?
Yeah.
Mostly private groups that are going to buy it out of our gift shop because I don't share the revenue with the distributors or the retailers. But I do have to keep some aside for retailers. Now, some of the complexities with that, sometimes people come into our shop and they want things they can't have. As an example, they want a 10 year. It's funny, they used MGP in Indiana, the old Seagrams used to be demonized 10 years ago. They were the Antichrist. They were the devil. It's terrible whiskey.
But now, 10 years later, it's sitting there. You want it.
If they'll pay anything for it.
Yep.
So we actually have 10-year-old MGP barrels that we're probably going to sell to groups like this. But you're going to have to be a repeat customer. I'm not going to give it to you on the first date. Got to be a repeat customer, and that relationship and trust and commitment has to be there with one another, and then we'll open up some of those products for you.
That's called leverage.
You got it. But some people come in, they're crazy. They come in and they want to negotiate. The bourbon clubs, I love most of them. Some of them I don't. But some of them will want things they can't have. And then the adage is I'm not going to buy from you. And then I kind of look over like the deli counter at the local grocery store, and I just say, next. Yeah.
But what happens maybe one day, do you think the bourbon demand in my business, the real estate world, nobody saw this interest rate thing happening this quick. And boy, it changed our business overnight. So demand changed. Do you ever see a time where demand for bourbon could change because it's still at a really high peak, and I'm sure it's still growing?
I think you've already seen that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, there's some market. I just read a market report this morning, funny enough, where one of the local big guys reported that there's a local brand, without saying their name, where their stock has dropped 20% in the past year. And because global demand is down. Now you've got everything going on overseas with Israel, with Ukraine and Russia, and the tariffs are now a threat again, where it's a 50% tariff. And I don't think the international market really has ever opened up like folks thought it would. India and China, I don't think they're gravitating towards bourbon now. Am I an expert in the international part? No, I'm not. But I don't.
Japan loves it.
Yeah, but Japan's a small country though. They love Steph Curry, which is great for us.
There you go.
Yeah,
right.
so does Korea and some of these other places, but they buy it because of the star power name, not necessarily because of the brand.
So leverage comes and goes, right?
Yeah, it comes and goes, but I think you're starting to see. I think you're going to see a glut of it. So my business partner will tell you this from his coal business experience. He's got a famous line. He said, over 30 years, I've seen this movie, and it ends the same way every time. There's this overproduction. There's a lot of inventory, and then all of a sudden the sales stop or they drop, and then there's a flood of whiskey available on the wholesale market. And I've started to see that recently. I've started to see some prices on the wholesale market drop a little bit, and there's a whole lot of it available. I mean, it used to be really hard to find aged whiskey on the Kentucky whiskey on the open market. Impossible. Not anymore. It's readily available.
Really?
Everywhere, yeah.
So getting in line, so somebody could readily get in line for a single barrel, right?
With us?
Yeah.
You can.
Okay. There you go.
Not
Yeah,
everybody.
Not
You can.
everybody. Okay. So how does someone do it? It's about relationships, right? It's you have to foment something. How does someone do that if they're like, I want to get in line for one of his? What do they need to do for you guys?
You go to the Boone County Distilling website, and you find your way over to the single barrel program portion of it, and there's a small form that you fill out, and we'll contact you. Our salesperson will reach out to you. And, look, for 2024, we probably book out realistically 3 months in advance. As you get towards the end of the year, the spots fill up, but as the word gets out there, it'll fill up quicker. And I will add, we don't ship samples. We tried to play that game for a little while where if you were in some other state, Josh would be a nice guy and I'd send you 4 small, like 50 milliliter sample bottles. And then the unfortunate part is people, you don't know who they are. And I've got to see the commitment. Back to that word commitment. I need you to come to the distillery and sit down and do it because that's commitment.
Yep. What is your most popular product?
Bourbon cream. I think bourbon cream is probably the most popular.
We recently had we do a fall fest for our company, and we had it down at Bitten Farms in Walton, and we had a hot chocolate station, and I just strolled right into some convenience store or somewhere. No, I was at Sam's Liquor, the liquor store.
Yeah, in Florence.
And I said, we should get a bourbon cream. And we got it, and boy, it was a hit. It was your guys' bourbon cream, I believe. And it was dang good. I think we needed more.
Yes.
Why is that? What is it? What is it about that bourbon cream? Why is that so popular?
Bourbon cream, here's what we see when visitors come to the distillery.
It's because you're Irish.
Yeah, it could be because of the Irish thing. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm Irish. So when folks come to the distillery for a tour, they get a 45-minute tour and a 15-minute tasting. And for the 15-minute tasting, we line them up 4 whiskeys, right? It could be bourbon, could be rye whiskey, whatever. Could be the new make stuff, the moonshine, new make off the still. But we always end it with a bourbon cream because more times than not, people want to come to the distillery for the experience. It's cool. It's not something they do every day. It's, for the most part, a uniquely Kentucky thing. If they don't like whiskey simply because it's a high proof, it's not that they don't like whiskey, they just don't like high proof spirits. It doesn't matter if it's vodka, tequila, whatever. If it's something over 80 proof, it's too hot for them. It burns. It's rough, whatever. But the bourbon cream is sweet, as you know. It's sweet, it's creamy, it's delicious. It's got a little bourbon flavor to it. And man, if you don't like a bourbon pecan pie at Thanksgiving or Christmas, I mean, what's wrong with you?
Something wrong with you?
Something wrong with you.
How were you able to get listed on the Bourbon Trail? I mean, this Bourbon Trail's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
The official Bourbon Trail in Kentucky. How were you able to get on it?
Well, I've got a couple things here. Ask me about the brown sign on I-75.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
What about the brown sign on 75?
Right. So after we got on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, which is very easy, you just click on the website, you pay them their money, you get inspected, you're on it, right? And that's the simple way around it. The brown sign on the interstate. So we've all traveled all across this great nation, and if you see a brown sign, it's a tourism spot. Paul Brown Stadium, Riverfront Stadium, Great American as it is, the Ark locally, couple other distilleries. But how do you get that brown sign? Well, probably gonna get in trouble for saying this, but you have to go to a website also, and you go to the Kentucky State Department of Transportation. And I've told the story a gazillion times, and you talk to a bureaucrat who will tell you everything you want to hear and give you the metrics of what you need to get that sign, which for us, it was 70,000 visitors a year, which we don't get that much. But we're on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, which gets 2 million visitors a year. So it's an aggregate. You're a part of something bigger. But sometimes a bureaucrat doesn't understand that, and it's so hard to knock it into their heads. So as time goes on, the bureaucrat says, call me for anything you need or email me. We do that. And I was warned this was going to be a frustrating process. So 18 months later, the bureaucrat, to me, becomes a useless bureaucrat.
You might not even be talking to the same person.
It was the same person.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll keep the name private to protect the names of the not so innocent. Yeah, right. So I was frustrated, and I made a phone call to one of our local elected officials, and I'm very proud to say his name. It was Sal Santoro, and Sal was a representative in Kentucky, former, and he was chairman of the State Transportation Committee. So I called Sal, and I don't ever call and ask for favors. That's just not my style. I don't ever call and ask for favors. But I called him and I said, Sal, how do I get a brown sign? And I went through and told him what happened the past 18 months. And he said, well, why didn't you call me sooner? And I said, well, I wanted to do it the right way, as it is. And he goes, well, this is the right way. It's just another way. So he said, give me your application. I'm going to go talk to the Secretary of Transportation in the morning. And I gave it to him. I made my business case to him. Document was signed within 24 hours. Now, what did it cost? So you can ask me this. What did it cost?
Hey, Josh, what did the brown sign cost?
$23,000 in each direction for a total of $46,000 out of our pocket.
Why?
Yeah, because that's what it is. I mean, you can get approved, but there's a lot of hurdles. So whenever you're up and down Interstate 75 around the 178-mile marker, the Mount Zion Road exit, pretty much between the Florence Union exit 180, and the 178, which is Mount Zion, you'll see the brown Boone County Distillery signs, and you can just think to yourself, that was $46,000 that these guys paid.
That's a marketing number, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think that you asked for a favor. I think what he actually said was right, was that, see, you did your due diligence. You put the 18 months in, right, and that process didn't work, and so now it's like, hey, this is valid, so let me go and see if I can get someone to help. I actually believe that's the way government bureaucracy is supposed to work.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. Now, the 18 months sucks, but I believe if there's representatives, could be a local council person, could be a mayor, that they should be there to listen to valid arguments about something you need, and it makes sense to them, and they go do it. So it worked right.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, if you were in business and you were trying to provide good customer service to a client, you'd be out of business if you acted like that.
Yeah, yeah. But it's nice you still have the resource. But that relationship that you had with Sal probably goes back to having a certain reputation, too, that when you pick up the phone, he's like, oh, if you didn't know him personally, it's like, oh, if I call people and ask them about your reputation, like, hey, he's a stand-up guy, right? So it's important to, man, you got to go out here and live the right way. So
yeah,
you got
it, man.
Right? So what do you think the future of Boone County Distilling Company is?
The future of Boone County Distilling. It's a bright, great future.
Because you're kind of getting old.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. The blonde-haired and blue-eyed guy, I did say salt and pepper, so I set myself up to it. Yeah. You know, look, when you get into this business, there's three kinds of people that get into it. You know, it's the father and son, you know, doing moonshine in their backyard, basically. They're trying to build a business out of that. Then you have, you know, like folks, I'll use a name here. Bardstown Bourbon's a great name to use. They're a wonderful, huge facility. I can't remember the guy's name that started that in the communications business, but he's a billionaire, right? So they built something really, really large on a high-end commercial scale. So then you have the big guys. And then you have Josh Quinn and Jack Wells, who we're not the backyard guys, and we're not the big, you know, monster, big business guys, but we're in the middle. And we build it to sell it. No secret there. So the future of it, you know, I don't think we'll always own it. You know, and hopefully the next person that comes in and takes it, whenever that is, they can take it from the level that we got it to the next level.
Give me a big number today that isn't insulting, that if someone would give it to you, that you sell it.
I would probably tell you somewhere around $28 million.
Okay. That's
probably a fair number. Now, that doesn't include the inventory in the warehouse. I would tell you that the business itself is probably $28 million. We can argue that and come up with plus or minus a couple million. But then there's the inventory. So there's 3,000 barrels of whiskey that are aging behind us on our property. And those barrels, I would tell you that if we sold them as single barrels out of the gift shop, I've done this math problem before. If we sold them out of the gift shop, strictly
$6 million bucks, is that what it is? 60.
The barrels?
Yeah. How many are the 3,000? times 3,000 barrels.
Well, it would. That's a harder math problem, but I would
Okay.
tell you, I'll give you a little simple one.
Okay.
If we sold them all the gift shop as single barrels, it's probably somewhere around $28 million.
Okay.
Plus the other 28.
Yeah.
Right?
So 56.
But the reality is they're not all going to go out of the back as single barrels. So,
40 to 50 million bucks.
Maybe we'll see. I don't really know the answer to that.
Yeah.
And it's whatever somebody wants to pay. So then there's that.
Yep.
I don't know. And then the Curry thing, which is another. Look, that guy. I will tell you this. He came to visit the distillery on July 8th. Him and his team, and I would tell you that he's the real deal. Everything that you see on social media and his whole persona. The product is called Gentleman's Cut, and it's true. The guy's a pure gentleman. You can't find a classier guy on planet Earth, a perfect gentleman as it is. But he's Steph Curry. Just his name alone, dwarfs whatever the distillery could ever do.
Is there a market behind creating 20 more of those relationships and having 20 different lines?
Probably not. I think when you're talking about Steph Curry, and look, it's all speculative. It's nice to dream like about winning the lottery, but most of us don't win the lottery. But we buy a ticket and we're in the game. So to create 20 more of those, I don't think so. I really don't. I think coming across a Steph Curry is just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Really? Because what about who's the MMA guy from Ireland or whatever?
Conor McGregor.
He started his own whiskey line or whatever and sold it for like a few $100 million. The actor recently did it too. I forget. Maybe that was a vodka or a what's his name? The guy who bought the European soccer team too.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yep.
Yeah.
He started some spirits company.
And Ricky Gervais is doing one now also.
Right.
And if you haven't seen the Ricky Gervais, by the way,
He's hilarious.
The Twitter feed of his vodka product.
That's good.
Oh my gosh, it's hilarious.
So there aren't 20 of these?
Nah, I don't think in the bourbon space there is. I really don't. And maybe there's 20 of them out in other spaces. I just don't know in bourbon if I see it. I could throw out some other names that have been I can't do it. Some signed NDAs, but there's other people that have been interested. And A, we don't have the capacity to handle them. B, I think other people kind of beat them to the punch in some regard.
Okay. This is similar to the Patron story back in the day. The guy, for God's sakes, he made shampoo, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's what's the guy's name that started Patron? He's a hairstylist. Yeah, no. Just if you can Google that, guys. And so when they sold it, it was like a couple $1 billion or something, I think.
Good for him.
For a tequila.
Yeah.
Right? So you think it's more about, you just don't think those brands are there, huh, that can carry that? The investment, the commitment, that have the brand awareness, that have the impact?
I think with the big guys out there, they would have already have done it. I think the closest we've seen someone get in the whiskey space, or the bourbon space anyway, was Matthew McConaughey with Wild Turkey, but then he has since moved on. I saw a commercial where he's in something else.
What is it? So it is Paul Mitchell.
Oh?
Yeah, he's the Patron guy.
I had no clue.
Yeah. So see, nobody even knew the guy. But anyway, so let's go back here to McConaughey.
Yeah. I don't know that I've seen we've seen people try to get involved in the celebrity bourbon space, and I'll say this. For the Gentleman's Cut product, it's a wonderful product. It's delicious and all that stuff. But when you see the reviews coming out, I actually quit reading online reviews anymore. They're a dime a dozen, and there's no rhyme or reason to them. So the Gentleman's Cut product, when you find somebody in the celebrity space, then you just find some haters out there. And it doesn't matter what you could put out the best product on planet Earth, and they're just going to trash it. It's going to be a drive-by shooting massacre. They don't like it. They're going to do whatever they can. And then there's others that are a little too over the top. And then there's, there are some of them that have written reviews. There's one, I'll say it, Paste Magazine, Paste. They wrote such a wonderful review. I couldn't have personally written that any better myself. We don't know the person, and that was the best review I've seen on us and the product and the brand. For anything we've ever done.
Did you know it was happening, or it just came out and it showed up?
Just came out and showed up.
What's the background of the review? What is it?
So I think you had a reporter that took the time to go beyond the press release. So what some writers do is they look at the press release and then they write a review based on that. Others will get the press release and then they do their due diligence. They Google, they phone call, they do whatever, and they put together a story. I'm an old investigator, so you put together your case. That's what this guy did. The essence of it, so he talks about the pot still. So all of our whiskey's made on a pot still, which is more flavorful than a column still. And he jumps into that.
What's
now,
the difference?
Well, so at least there's certain things a pot still can't take out of whiskey, which is flavor. So think of it like this. Do you like steak?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I love a filet. You probably like something different, but
I like it all.
I love a filet.
So would you ever go to the butcher and ask for that big steak and say, you know what, I want the one with no fat in it?
No.
Right.
No.
A column still is like that. It's like going to the butcher and saying, take all the fat out of it. So they distill out a lot of flavors. The pot still can't take some out, so it leaves a lot of oils behind and a lot of flavor.
So in the review,
the guy gets the review, and he talks about the nuances of a pot still, and he talks about the flavor and the complexity, and it's like an onion. It's got lots of layers. And then he talks about how it's handcrafted, how a pot still has to be it's a very labor-intensive process. And then he goes on and he talks about Stephen Curry, which was probably the best part. And he says a guy like Stephen Curry has always been underrated. Always been underrated. He had an Apple documentary come out this summer I think it was called Underrated.
Just like your bourbon.
So you got it, baby. And he likes to work with the little guys because the big guys don't interest him. It was the little guys, and that part's been great.
Let's say this thing sells at some point. It will. If that's what you're building it for, it will sell. What's Josh do then?
You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. Hopefully my best friend and business partner, Jack Wells, allows me to come on another adventure with him and we do something else. I think that's what I'll do.
Why?
You know what? He's my best friend and business partner. And I also, on the side, I do work for the regional tourism board, right? And I love that job. It gets me across the region. You know, I'm a regional and local guy, and I love my relationships, just like we talked about earlier. I'm a people person. I've got a lot of deep roots in this community from a lot of different ways. I probably wouldn't change too much. I would continue on with Jack. I'd continue on with helping marketing Northern Kentucky to because we're underrated also. You want us to get us to punch above our weight, and that's what we try to do every day. And we couldn't do that. And here's my plug for my boss in that world. Julie Kirkpatrick is a genius and wonderful at what she does, and it wouldn't happen without her believing in the whole team. But Jack, on the business side, because he's fun, he's a genius, he's brilliant, and we'll find something else to do and have fun with it.
When you say he's a genius,
yeah.
When you say that, what's the metrics in your mind about him being a genius?
Metrics in my mind being a genius. He is definitely not risk adverse. He's smart and he's calculating. The genius part of it, there's just a part about, and maybe he thinks the same thing about me because we're both different. With my law enforcement background and the way that my brain thinks is one way, but he has something that I don't, which is the entrepreneurial thing. I have never seen him say no to a conversation because it doesn't cost anything. He'll talk about anything. Now, some ideas just evaporate and go away, but others he'll take a risk on. And I think the genius part of it is that he's one of those guys who can develop a relationship with anybody. He's very good at it. He's very good at separating, the cream from everything else.
He can read a situation for what it is really damn quick, probably.
Yeah, and we both have different gifts for that. But the genius part of it, he
just knows what to do.
Knows what to do. The metrics of it, I can't put a number behind it.
You just know it.
You
just know it. You're like, that guy is just good.
He's got it.
Yeah.
He's got it.
So what is it?
For him?
I'm just in general. I've actually had that conversation with 20% of the people that come in here.
Yeah.
Because we always, no matter what the business is, they have it. Well, what is it?
It is reading every document that comes across. It is watching every penny that comes across the books. It is never giving up an inch when you don't have to. It is probably the art of pushing back politely, because most people don't want to be pushed back on, the art of negotiation, and never just giving in after the first. It's like Johnny Bench used to say at the Reds, you don't have to swing at the first pitch. Jack never does that, and he's taught me that. Sometimes, we don't ever lie to people. I've never done that my entire life. I don't lie to anybody, but I might not tell you everything. And I've learned that from him also. And even in business, I probably still say too much. So it is a lot of things. You can't measure that with one or two things, because if I had a magic recipe to describe it, then none of us would have it, right? Then we could bottle it up and sell it, and then we'd off be doing something else.
So if you're going to go down another venture and another path with him, you sure have embraced this idea of being a business owner, an entrepreneur, and all the dark days and moments. And you can be a good, optimistic, powerful, confident guy. There's still really tough moments in business.
Yeah.
You want to sign up for that again?
With him, 100%. Yeah, we've been through that. So in our personal relationship, I mean, look, our friendship was tested a while back. We've had bumps in the road, but it all goes back to that trust, loyalty, commitment. It just kind of perseveres. And like I said, if you have a good foundation, right, man, the thing is concrete and it was poured the right way and the concrete cured the right way, it doesn't matter what happens, man. You know, a hurricane, a tornado, a cataclysmic, whatever could come through, you're going to be fine. So our foundation is really what kept us together. And that's what I would tell you, man. If you can find somebody like that where you got a good foundation, the rest is easy.
Go all in, right?
Yeah, man.
When you said he does a good job of not saying everything or telling everything, why is that important? Because you didn't just combine it with a negotiation. You just said, hey, even in business, I probably say too much at times. Why is it important not to say everything?
Well, so have you ever played poker before?
Oh, yeah.
Cards.
I love me some poker.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So whenever they deal you, let's just say we're playing 5-card stud. They deal your cards. You ever just throw the cards on the table and let everybody see them?
Well, no.
Yeah.
Why would I do such a thing?
Same thing in
I'm
business.
competitive. I want to win.
Right. Same thing in business. I might get dealt a really crappy hand and the odds are terrible, but I just want to push the table and kind of see what happens.
Do you ever do it and like, I only need one? Like have the worst hand. I just need one.
Yeah.
And they get all scared and then you make a big bet and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, sometimes.
Right?
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work out though.
Sometimes you run into like a nice, a good flusher.
It's like I said before. I have one play. I run the ball up the middle.
Okay.
Now sometimes I get hit for a loss.
Okay. Sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
Just don't go all in and expose yourself to that risk. Working for the tourism board.
Yeah.
And you love Northern Kentucky and the region. There is this problem that where do so many people say they're from? So you meet someone. I went to Europe last year, my first time there, but anywhere all over the country. And they're like, hey, where are you from? What do so many people say?
Northern Kentucky.
But then what else could they say? Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
Right?
Sure.
What does Northern Kentucky even mean? It's not a city. That's what makes this thing so difficult.
Yeah.
There's a couple areas. I think there's the Triad in North Carolina. And how is that marketed? Like you're in the midst of it with Julie and stuff. Like, we can feel passionate about it, but it has to be marketable.
Well, you don't have to go very far to find people give you a different definition of the Kentucky. As an example, I have a friend who brought this very discussion up in Lewis County, which is along the river. Maybe an hour and a half east
south of Louisville?
No. Lewis County's east in between us and Ashland.
Okay.
So about an hour and a half east of us, on your way to Ashland, which for listeners is on your way to West Virginia, which takes you eventually to the Atlantic Ocean.
You cross over to Ohio. It's down in that little pocket, right?
You got it.
Okay.
So Lewis County is in the northern part of the state. And you could call it Northern Kentucky, the same as you could call to the west of us Gallatin County, Carroll County. They sit on the river. You could call that Northern Kentucky.
Scott County, maybe.
Scott County, sure. I could count that. Yeah, they could go central, but probably more northern. But yeah, I would they could call themselves northern for sure. So all these people, when you say Northern Kentucky, there was a guy in Lewis County who said, well, I'm from Northern Kentucky. And I'm like, well, Northern Kentucky is Boone, Kenton, and Campbell County. And the guy's like, well, why does it have to be Boone, Kenton, and Campbell County? Because you guys do these regional things together, and it's the population center and all those things. But the point was well made, that Northern Kentucky really represents those cities along, the northern border of Kentucky along the Ohio River. So what is it?
South of Cincinnati.
Yeah. So we have this partnership. It's called the Cincy Region. We do it with the city of Cincinnati with their tourism board. It's called the Cincy Region. So when our team goes overseas to market, or even in CONUS, the continental United States, it's branded as the Cincy Region, and that goes over better than Northern Kentucky, because Northern Kentucky, we know what it is, but it's like saying Northern Virginia. What is Northern Virginia? Well, it's the Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah, south of D.C.
Yeah. So, but not everybody knows that. Or when you mention the Triad for North Carolina.
Greensboro. There's 3 of them there, yeah.
Yeah, I had no clue when you said that.
Yeah.
So the Cincy region is a better identifier, and I think we get better traction with that. So that's a start.
But it doesn't feel special to us.
No, well, you can't. We've gotten away from calling it Cincinnati, so it doesn't feel special to a Northern Kentuckian. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is that we're always going to be next to Cincinnati. It's a mid-size American city. I don't think you're going to find any cities here that compare in name recognition to Cincinnati.
So we have to embrace being the south side of the city.
Yeah,
Is that kind of what it is?
Yeah, I think it's the south side of the city because we're sure not Lexington and we're sure not Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I've heard people say before, you're from Northern Kentucky, and they'll say, "Is that Louisville?" And it's like, well, no, Louisville's an hour and a half away from us.
Yeah, southwest. Yeah. So it's really tough. What we're asking here is tough.
Yeah, it's tough. You've got to get people up to the region. Now, most people that come to live here, they have visited here first. So we get loads of traffic on, I-75 brings 70 million people a year here. When folks are coming to this region, they're coming for work or they're visiting friends or family.
What makes it special?
Northern Kentucky?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Northern Kentucky, the quality of life here, you've got lower cost housing, lower taxes. It's a pretty homogenous community. I will say Northern Kentucky, in my personal opinion, it's tribal, right? Because like the first question you ask, what's the first question?
Well, a lot of times it's like, where'd you go to school?
You got it.
Right? And we don't mean college. We mean high school.
Yeah. Where'd you go to high school?
Yeah.
So not every place does that. It's not very diverse, which is there's pluses and minuses to that. It's a lot of suburban areas, a lot of families and neighborhoods, things like that. There's no city center of anything. Like Boone County, where we're both from, give me like downtown Boone County. What is it?
Burlington, but there's no downtown Boone County anywhere.
Right.
There's not. Maybe Union's trying to become that now with the new, but there's not one.
Yeah.
There's not one.
Yeah, there's no downtown anything. So that's hard. I think Covington's about as close as you get to that, downtown Covington.
Newport's trying to do it with some stuff.
Newport's trying to do it.
But there's not a hub. I mean, the hub of Hamilton County is Cincinnati.
I think if you're trying to, what makes this region unique, if you can get somebody here, most people probably have never lived someplace they haven't previously visited, number one. So when you come here, it's a wonderful place to raise a family. I mean, if you're going to raise a family here, forget about it. You've got great schools. You've got access to it's families and neighborhoods and subdivisions.
Good jobs, cost of living.
Good jobs.
You can live a good life.
And the airport.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't talk about the economic impact and the 800-pound gorilla that CVG is to the region, you're right here next to a major United States airport. I think it's the number one cargo hub in the United States now. We're pretty close to it. So you've got that. Bars, restaurants. Wonderful bars and restaurants. You don't have to go far to look for that. Breweries, distilleries. I mean, heck, when you're in Kentucky and we talk about bourbon, Ohio can't claim their bourbon country. I mean, I don't know if, there might be a couple distilleries, but I don't think they're making bourbon.
They can claim flat land after you get north of Cincinnati. That's all they claim.
Yeah, right.
I'll talk shit about it. I will. And we sell a lot of houses up there, too. I don't care. It's flat, y'all. You get north of Cincinnati and you make that drive to Columbus or make that drive to Dayton, there's not much to look at.
Hey, it's the perfect place for an autonomous vehicle.
Is that it?
Yeah.
What'd you think? What does law enforcement think about autonomous vehicles?
I haven't. I've been gone for about 2.5 years. So autonomous vehicles, I don't know. In fact, my friends that are still in it, I don't know that I've heard much about that. I don't think I've heard anything about it.
Will you drive one? Because they're going to be here full autonomy by the time, if we get to live full lives, by the time we're gone.
I'm not going to say no. I wouldn't drive one. I haven't been in one yet. But I'm a guy who, when we're driving someplace, I mean, I want to be in control and I want to drive the vehicle.
Tesla has a new truck. You said you wanted an expensive truck. Tesla has a new truck.
Yeah, I know. We've got. We'll have to test that one out. If Elon Musk is listening, tell him I'm happy to test drive one out here. We can, we can both take turns on it.
Right. What's the next idea in bourbon that someone could really take and run with?
The next idea in bourbon that somebody could take and run with. Let me think about that.
Is there one?
Yeah, I think everybody has kind of found out. I can tell you what probably doesn't work so well. I think Louisville has tried this on Whiskey Row with these micro distilleries, and that's really hard. If you're a big guy, it's like having a restaurant or a bar, right? And either it makes money or it doesn't. If you're a little guy, it's really hard to make it if you're small. So I don't think a micro distillery is really in the pathway. I think some of these monster distilleries, we keep hearing these ridiculous $billion-dollar amounts with people expanding in bourbon. But when you have found that 2023 has actually brought a bit of a global decline, I think I read it this morning. I think it was a total of 3% or something like that globally. So if hopefully 2024 we can recapture that. But building these monster distilleries, I think that's probably a mistake. I think keeping it the size of like the local distilleries we have in the area, and I'll put the shameless plug in. If you're looking for a distillery to buy, we're the perfect size. We're a turnkey operation. Come see me.
What makes vineyards cool is they're in the country. There's hills. There's not much cool about distillery locations. And why doesn't someone do that?
Location specific?
Yeah, like why don't they get out and make it have a cool feel like a vineyard feels?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. So if we're talking in northern Kentucky, the land is so expensive. So you have all these ancillary facilities with the airport, these Amazon support facilities or warehousing operations. Look, I mean, they're moving a lot of merchandise and product, and the land's pretty expensive. So if we're talking $1 million an acre or whatever that it is, that's pretty expensive to build a warehouse where whiskey barrels are just going to sit and do nothing.
Yeah, but why didn't you guys keep Boone County Distilling Company in Petersburg in there? Why not?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we get criticized early on. We got criticized a lot for being in an industrial park. So we were located back in Tobin Drive off of Mount Zion Road. So in Boone County, we have a highly evolved planning and zoning commission, highly evolved, which is great. And to build a distillery, you had to be zoned in what's called I-2. And we knew we wanted to keep it in Boone County. So like Kenton and Campbell and Gallatin, they're out of the question because it's the Boone County, the history of the old Petersburg distillery. Wouldn't be right if we called it the Boone County Distillery, but we're located in Campbell County. Wouldn't make sense. So in Boone
that's your saving grace?
That's a saving grace. So the only
the I-2,
Industrial 2. So the Industrial 2 property, you can distill alcohol there, right? That's what zoning says. If we want to take it someplace else, like Petersburg, well, then we have to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we have to get a zone change, which becomes a very public hearing that could take 6 months, and then everybody knows what we're doing. They know we're going to build a distillery. So you got to wind the clock back 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if other people were exploring this, then they would say, there's a distillery coming, let's get ahead of this thing. Now, that never happened, but you don't know that back then.
Yeah.
Building in Petersburg. Why not Petersburg? Well, Petersburg. That
was going to be the capital of the state.
Yeah, well, you just hit a key word, past tense was. So since the old distillery shuttered its doors in about 1900, and we're both from there, so it's okay to say it. What's happened in Petersburg in the past 123 years?
They might have paved a road.
Yeah, not much.
Not much.
So we did look in Petersburg, actually. So we looked down there. It's hard to get to. So we have a lot of tractor trailers coming in and out, and you sure can't take them down, Kentucky 20 down to Petersburg when it's snowy or wet, or it's not going to work out. Tractor trailer accidents, you can see that a mile away. 2, there's a water situation down there. There's not enough water. 3, you have sewage issues. You have water issues. Tourism issues. Would you rather be in an industrial park a mile off of I-75 where there's 70 million cars a year, or would you rather be 10 miles away from I-275 where there's a fraction of that?
The economics just didn't. Yeah. They weren't in your favor.
No, not in our favor. Now, Antres and Genesis has done a great job with the Creation Museum, but that's a very specific thing. There's not religious, attractions all over the state like that. That is truly a destination. That is truly a destination for this region of the United States.
Yeah. What do you think? I've never been down there, so I need to come visit because we'll probably buy a barrel from you.
To the distillery?
No, I haven't been down there.
Oh man, anytime you want to hear it. You know what's funny? Right here, I got a free tour ticket for you.
Look at this.
Look at that, man.
So
I came prepared.
Let me see this thing. Free tour ticket. And then what we could do is if we get in line for this barrel, I think we only have 20 something left of our other ones, and if we get in line for it, we can actually put the barrel in here and do all that stuff.
Yeah,
which would be awesome. You're a bourbon connoisseur, right?
I like bourbon. Yeah.
Yep. You're going to be a homer and say yours is awesome. You're going to.
Sure. Yeah.
You're going to. Have you ever won any awards?
Yeah. We have actually entered any contests for a while. So we entered into the San Francisco Spirits Competition. I'm trying to think of some others. There's been a couple others we've entered into. Yes, we've won plenty of awards, but we quit doing it, honestly, because, those things are like $500 an entry, and when you've got 6 products you want to enter,
it's only $3,000.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and
But you guys sponsor.
What's the return on that?
I don't know, but
Yeah.
you sure do sponsor something awesome at Great American Ballpark for the Cincinnati Reds.
Yes, we do.
Right?
Yes.
I'm sure that costs more than entering some contests to get some ratings.
Yes.
Why'd you guys do that? So that was really prominent for your brand. That's the first time that I really went, wow, these guys are doing something big. Whoever they are, they're doing something.
Yeah. So my business partner, Jack Wells, I keep saying his name, he's a pro sports fan. Always has been. He's a diehard Bengals fan and Buffalo Bills fan, which is where he's from, and a Reds fan. He loves pro sports. So that was a couple years ago. We got into that. And, you have these rare opportunities in life. And again, you've got the entrepreneur who builds airplanes as he's flying them. And, it's funny, when he signed the deal with the Reds, it was a 3-year deal. With COVID, it extended it to 4 years. Jack didn't tell me he signed it until I think I read about it on Twitter or something. And I mentioned it to him. I said, did we sign a deal with the Reds? And he's like, oh, yeah, I did that earlier in the week. And I'm like, you going to tell me about it, man?
Is that one of those moments?
Yeah.
Is that one of those moments like, dude, that's a lot of money?
Yeah. He told me, but, But in business, as you know, there's managing partners. And if you don't own 51% of it, then you might as well own.
You can throw your little hissy fit.
Yeah.
Own 49%. It's the same as owning like 0.5%.
You got it, man.
Yeah.
So for Jack,
it was special to him too.
Yeah, special.
Felt cool.
And look, man, and have you been to the Bourbon?
Yes.
The
Yes.
Boone County Bourbon Press Club?
It's awesome up there.
Yeah.
It's a couple $100 a ticket. It's kind of like a suite type of experience, but it is really neat. It's a cool place to see a game from.
It is not just first class. It's a luxurious experience.
It's elite.
Now, we're in negotiations now with the Reds to re-sign the deal for next couple of years. And there's some back and forth with it, but we'll see how it goes. If I were to tell you today if we're going to re-sign or not, it's a coin flip.
Yep.
But we're actually, the discussion happened yesterday with them, and I think we're doing some back and forth, and that'll get solved pretty soon.
You know what sucks? I don't know what we can take about in this life, because even though you guys had the opportunity and now they want more money, I know how business goes. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, it worked out. They want more. We always want more.
Mm-hmm.
You want more for your bottles of bourbon when it works. Everybody wants more. You probably got in at a good price, and now they want more, but you helped them prove it out, and it's very easy. They could take this brand off of it and slap another bourbon brand on it, just like you could walk away and take the investment somewhere else. Boy, it sure sucks when you help somebody build something and the loyalty's not there in life. What the hell do we do with that? Not just in this scenario, but what do we do with that?
I'll tell you, dealing with some of these pro sports teams, without naming too many names, they're tough nuts, man. It depends what league you're dealing with, the NFL, Major League Baseball.
Now FC now you have soccer.
Well, so FC had approached us on some issues, but they've had such a great, tremendous season. Those conversations have stalled. But in the absence, with the great season they had, it came a bit of a cost because the Reds have jumped all over top of it and not letting any grass grow under their feet. Mm-hmm. So the cost of it, I think I've just gotten kind of used to that, but it does go back to me appreciating relationships. There are some of these folks that I really like seeing and talking to because I know they're going to do their due diligence on our behalf. And then there's others, that you seemingly enough, it's like, they have all the leverage and they're not scared to let you know that.
What have you learned about marketing and branding?
Costs a lot of money. People are finicky. I will give you one very specific example. So when our whiskey was released, the whiskey that we made at Boone County Distilling, that Josh Quinn, Jack Wells, and Michael Wells, our distiller, we're all very proud of. Our names appear on the back of the bottle. We released it as Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, and it was called Pot Still, right? Pot Still, because we're proud of it. We know it's great whiskey. However, when it got out into the market, I recognize that consumers can be ruthless. If they don't like something, it can take you 10 years to build a brand and 30 seconds to destroy it. So we put the Pot Still product out, and it was at a Christmas party about a year ago. So the timing for this podcast is perfect. It was about a year ago, and I go to a Christmas party, and I really don't drink that much of those things, but I go to it, and it was a guy who, the bartender says, and it was a friendly place where they had a lot of our bourbon, and the bartender knew me, and he says, "Do you want one of Josh's Pot Still bourbons?" And the guy says, "It's the worst shit I've ever had. I don't want it. It's garbage." And I was like, "Dude, I'm right here." So we talk a little bit, and I'm explaining the nuances of a pot still bourbon, and then as he continues to drink, I think he repeated that about 6 times. So the 6th time I said, "You've said it 6 times. I got it, man. I understand." And I actually left. I was so agitated I went home. And I called Jack the next morning, my business partner, and said, "We got to get rid of the name Pot Still." And he said, "Why?" And I said, because I keep hearing this. I'll read about it on reviews when I decide to go look at those on the internet, which I don't do a lot, or I've heard it in the community, or I heard it specifically this one night. It's the word pot still. That's all they can think of. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, let's get rid of the name pot still. I'm not married to that name. We need to move it. It's great. We need to move it. He said, what do you want to call it? And I said, let's call it Founders Reserve. And he said, why Founders Reserve? And I said, because I have removed this inherent bias out of your brain, like we talked about with flavors of whiskey, why you do or don't like things. Pot still, for some reason, is like a negative connotation with most people. So, and I'll finish with this. In my previous life, here's what I have learned as a law enforcement officer and being in the people business. This is not a rule of human behavior. It is a law. Okay? It is a law. Human beings are built to find reasons not to like things. Human beings are built to find reasons not to like things. So I just tried to take away one thing they didn't like.
And it works?
Yeah.
And it tastes the same.
Same whiskey.
How stupid is that?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So people are finicky. It's expensive. What positive is there? Is there a positive to branding and marketing? Come on, John.
Yeah, if you own the marketing agency and you're sending me the invoice, it's very positive.
What do you want us to do? Just know about it and drink it, and everybody like be your champion up on the mountain? Be like, this is the best thing ever.
Right.
Drink bourbon and don't even drink milk. Is that what
you got it, man.
What's your next level of marketing and branding that you guys do? You have your plan set, or is it still evolving? Like, if you're going to build this and sell it for 50 or 60 or 70 million bucks, you still have to expose a little bit more, right?
Yeah. So what we did recently, when we got our $300,000 bottling line, we had to change all the branding. So it was a good time to get rid of the name Pot Still and put Founders Reserve on it. So the bottling line is finicky, like people, and it takes, for every bottle that we have, for every type and variety of whiskey that we put out, the label has to be the same size and shape on the front and the back, and then the next strip on top. It has to be the same. So it was a good chance to rebrand. And also it helped, this is the third or fourth iteration of labels that we've had. So that was the next level. We're into it now. And it seems to be working. I hear a lot of positivity about it. Nothing negative, which is great.
So if someone were to taste what's the most popular of these?
Let me see.
Oh, the bourbon creamery we talked about. So, So is it a rye? Is it a wheat? What do you think's?
What do I think is okay?
Like, the average person's like, oh, that's the best one.
Oh, the average person. The average person's probably going to go towards the small batch bourbon.
Okay.
Okay.
So if I were to taste that now,
yeah,
would it taste unique, or would I in my brain go, oh, it tastes like this one? I'm not trying to get you at all to plug another brand. Does it taste unique?
So the small batch bourbon would probably, it's a 5, 6, 7-year-old bourbon that's in there. But if you go to the Founders Reserve bourbon, which is the whiskey that we made, yes, that is definitely unique, flavorful and rich. So that one is going to coat your mouth much like if you have a glass of milk, whole milk, and it coats you get that film inside of your mouth, or popcorn oil or something like that, or butter, right? It coats your mouth. That's what our whiskey does. It's delicious. However, my favorite whiskey that is not on that tour ticket that you're looking at, my favorite whiskey is our rye whiskey. It's called the Founders Reserve Rye Whiskey. It's a single barrel. We only sell the rye whiskey in single barrel now. It's 95% rye, 5% malted rye. And man, Larry Ebersold was the one who he didn't perfect. He didn't invent the rye whiskey recipe in Indiana, but he perfected it. And then he taught us, and he taught another local distillery how to do it also. Man, it's the best rye whiskey on planet Earth.
So sign us up, right?
Man, it's good. If you like having Manhattans,
yep.
With rye whiskey in it, oh my gosh, our rye whiskey's good. Now, unfortunately, rye whiskey doesn't sell as well as bourbon.
Why?
I think it's just because it's not bourbon.
Yeah, it doesn't sound the same.
It's rye. People they want bourbon, not rye.
But my friends that are true connoisseurs, they love rye. I hear them say it all the time, like, why is it? And I just haven't gone deep on the conversation.
Yeah.
They always think the more special ones are the ryes.
Yeah, I agree. That's my favorite.
Huh. All right, so we're going to get in line for a barrel. What can people do? Can we find this everywhere? I mean, if you go to any local liquor store, is it there?
Yeah, Northern Kentucky for the most part. Yeah, the further you get away from home, the harder it is to sell your product or tell your story. So the closer we are to Fort Wright,
mm-hmm.
Covington, Florence, Alexandria, Newport, Fort Thomas, Hebron, Burlington, Walton, Verona, etc. The closer we are to those places, the easier it is to find. It gets harder to find as you branch out from that.
Is that just all about distribution? Like, is that...
Yeah, it's about distribution and excitement. It's like drinking your, like a regional beer. You want something that's local, and then once you cross a certain line, it's not local anymore. Somebody else's. It's their backyard.
If we do a single barrel, do we get a little etching on it and all that stuff? Do we get that?
You get a side sticker. So the etching, if we wanted to do an etching, that comes through Sterling Cut Glass. They're wonderful partners, but it's expensive. So the etching per bottle through Sterling Cut Glass per bottle, I mean, it's like $16. It's expensive.
Well, that sucks.
That sucks. But so what we do is we do the front and back labels remain constant with what you see on the market, but we do a side sticker, and then it'll say Boone County single barrel with your logo on one portion and then your name on the other.
All right, so support local. You're a local support guy,
You got it, man.
Where do we go find like a little Christmas basket and stuff? What's the best place
The
to
distillery.
go? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. What are hours? Like, is it 7 days a week?
Yeah. No, we're open every day except for Monday. And then the hours, generally speaking, we can call it 10:30 till about 5:30.
So you guys have an event center too. I checked out the website.
Yeah.
Has that been successful?
Yeah. The event center, this time of year, we're pretty successful. About 3 events a week, which taxes our staff. I think they're going to be happy when it slows down to 1 or 0 a week, which will come. The cold months are coming. Once Christmas is over with, all the parties and things are done, and everybody's trying to pay off, whatever bills they have, that'll die off for about 3 months.
Do you ever get groups that come together that want to buy a barrel together? Can you sticker half and half?
Yeah.
You can do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you buy a barrel, you don't have to buy the whole barrel. So it's about, we're very customer service oriented. So if you come to us and you say, Josh, look, okay, I can't afford $12,000. I got $5,000. And I'll say, that's fine. Just take $59.99, divide it by 5,000 and
still come in, do the tasting, do the whole nine
Yeah,
yards.
we'll give you the royal treatment. Yeah.
Can you do the tasting before making the commitment, or it's like I'm signing up?
No. Sorry to answer so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you'll come in to do the tasting, and we don't require a deposit or commitment. We've had a couple folks that come in and they just decide they don't want to buy. That's, I think, this year out of 50 weeks or whatever we're into now, that's maybe happened 2 or 3 times.
Okay, that's pretty good though.
Yeah, some people come in and they just have a change of heart, or there's one person in the group who just says it's not. So what you'll find, this is interesting, bourbon groups will come in. One guy brought a backpack in and he pulled out all these bottles, and he wanted to compare ours against that, and I had to tell him, look, you're comparing apples and oranges. You can't do that. You've got to weigh the whiskey on its own merit, and plus I can't, I didn't bring this in through a distributor the proper way. You can't bring it in here and drink it, so... Anyway.
There he came. There, the tough Josh came out.
Yeah, they get mad sometimes, and they say, "Well, I'm the customer, so I'm always right."
Was that the same guy sitting at the bar, and the guy said it 6 times? You're like, "All right, man, I've heard it enough." Is it like these moments? Like, no, this is it.
Different guy, but same person. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
yeah,
the same person.
Yeah.
Give us. We're going out 2023.
Yeah.
Into 24. Give us a Joshism that is going to make us a little bit better, man, in life, in business, a friend, a family member. Just give us a little something maybe we haven't talked about that's going to make us better going into 24.
Yeah, I'll tell you something I've learned throughout my entire law enforcement career, and we'll get away. I won't go into the funny stuff. I'll stay on something serious. Just be kind to people and be good. I mean, everybody is fighting through something in their life. If you ever ask somebody, how are things going? They say it's going great. They're not telling the truth. There's always one thing that's going sideways or not well. So be patient and talk to people. Be kind. Everyone has a different kind of a journey, and just listen to them, because if it's real to them in their head, then it's real. So that would be it. Be kind to people. Respect them. That's the Joshism.
All right. So one final thing here.
Yeah.
I always like finding out the moments when you and Jack maybe thought about quitting.
Yeah.
Why didn't you?
There was a time when I was mostly upset with him, truthfully. That was him, man. I mean, it was he could have easily went a different direction, and I will give full credit to him. Trust, loyalty, commitment. I mean, Jack and I have a solid foundation, and I don't think I realized how concrete and cured that thing was until that happened. That's it. I'll give all the credit to him.
So he's kept going. Do you think that decision was made? So you would have walked away?
I was prepared. Yes, on principle, I was prepared to walk away. Yeah.
It wasn't anything about the struggle and the toughness of being a business owner.
No,
Right.
that part of it. He's very good at that. Jack's great at that stuff. This was more of an interpersonal thing, and I'll give the credit to him. It just took me a while to get over some things, like happens in business. You get frustrated and you don't own 51% of a business, but then I recognized at a stage, and we both did, that our friendship was worth more than anything, and that was probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7. But like ever since then, man, it's just gotten better.
That's special.
Yeah.
Like when you realize that moment.
Oh yeah.
And I think until really something gets really tested, maybe you don't know.
That's correct. Yep. You're right.
What would Jack tell us if he were here today?
He's full of shit.
He wouldn't.
Don't listen to him.
He wouldn't tell us that though, would he?
Don't listen to him. He's full of shit. Yeah. I don't know what he'd tell you.
He'd say something. If I said, "Hey Jack, give us something all the years. What have you learned the most from him?" Because we've shared stuff and attributes. You've given him a ton of credit and accolades and how special he is.
Yeah.
But what have you learned from him?
If you were to say something, well, what have I learned from him? Let me go back to a question you asked. What would he say about me? I hope he would say something that if Josh tells you something, if he commits to something, you can take that check to the bank and cash it, right? I mean, he's committed, and once he's focused, he's zeroed in and he's on it.
You're authentic.
Oh yeah,
that's what he'd say. You want that? That's what you want people
authentic.
to believe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Authentic's a great word.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned from him? Like, is there something that really stands out that you think we'd learn as well? That like, hey, if he's a genius, like, what's there a thing that you could really articulate? There's probably a ton, but
yeah, no, we all put our pants on the same way, and when you're the little guy, you've got to it's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and then that plan falls apart. And for Jack, I'm not saying he punches people in the face. I'm just saying that that's a guy. He's taught me not to get shoved around. Now, there is a give and take in life for things, but for him, it's okay to speak up and have your voice heard. It's okay, like the Tecumseh poem. You can listen to other people and respect them, but you have to demand they respect your views. And that's, I think, what I've seen from him, that he demands that you respect his views.
With this new evolution of Josh from being an entrepreneur, I guarantee you evolved and grown in ways that you didn't when you were in the public sector.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that same guy find it tough to identify with the same people that you were friends with? Is that tough now?
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example. So when I retired from law enforcement, 2021, I had to sit out for a year. I basically had, for without getting into details, it was sort of like a no-compete. So after a year, I thought it was a good idea to go back into law enforcement, and I went back to the Boone County Sheriff's Office with Sheriff Mike Helmig. He hired me back at the rank of major, paying me a lot of money, which was great. He doesn't do that for anybody. But it was on day number 3. I wasn't there 3 days. And I had been gone for 8 years, really. I was in the FBI doing terrorism for 7 years. I built a distillery. I was on some public boards and just grew a lot. And when I went back there, and you can understand this being an old, did you go to Connor, right?
Yep.
You can understand this being an old Connor guy.
Yep.
Man, you can't go back to high school. It was the same old high school football stories every single morning with those guys. Nothing had changed. And I remember Mike got so mad at me one day. We had a talk. He wasn't mad at me. He made a point, and I told him I didn't think it was going to work out. And he said, "That's your fault." And I said, "Why is it my fault?" He said, "We haven't changed a bit around here. You've changed." And at that moment, I knew. I'm like, "You're right. I have changed." So I'll distill it down to this. You're 18 years old, right? You leave home. 8 years later, you're 26 years old. And then you decide it's a good idea to go live with mom and dad again. Does that ever work out in any world?
Not very long.
No. And that's what happened with them. So
you grew.
I grew, yeah. And I grew in a great way. Yep. And you just keep moving forward. Nothing stays stagnant or the same in life. We all move forward, and that was that. But I've been blessed. Like I said, I've led a very fortunate and lucky life.
Thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me. It's been great.
It's good to hear the story. It's neat when there's things that grow up in our backyard that we get to really talk about locally, and there's some guys and gals doing some special things that it's not just the big businesses. And I think the what we can take from this is it doesn't really matter where you came from. There are some things you need to have, some attributes as a human to go out and win in business, but it doesn't matter where you came from.
No, it doesn't matter where you come from. And I'll say this, if I can have a parting thought. There are many people in my life that I've come across and they've crossed my path, for whatever reason in life. And if they're listening to this, which they will be listening, because I'm going to tell them to, because I'm giving them a call out right now. They know exactly who they are, and I would tell them that I am blessed beyond belief that they've come into my life. I would tell them that I love them. I would tell them that I'll never forget, how I got from here to there, but it wouldn't have happened without them. So that's my parting word. And that just goes back to being good to people and thoughtful and saying thank you.
Keep on doing good shit, man. Our community is better coming across guys like you. All the stuff that you were in the previous life, and you're bringing that out now. I think we need more folks now that are leading these next generations to show us how to live better. And I think from meeting you, it's like, yeah, do you have possibly the old rigidity a little bit of law enforcement? Maybe, but you know what? That's based in good principles and good values, and we need people out here in the world that are saying, hey, just respect other folks.
Yep.
We're different. Live a good life. Do the right shit.
You got it, man.
Doesn't mean you can't have fun.
Right on.
Go and have a great time, live a good life. Thanks for being who you are, man. I'm excited to get to know you, be around you a little bit more, and get in line for a single barrel.
Let's do it, man.
All right, man. Appreciate you. Thank you.